First of all, and it's not rhetoric, it's a great, great pleasure to be here. I must say that I have enjoyed enormously teaching here at the Jackson Institute. And yes, as Professor Cameron said, and I wasn't there because I was looking for my glasses without which I'm lost, absolutely lost. And this is the problems of aging. But yes, Professor Cameron, this is an anecdote. When I was invited to teach at the Jackson Institute, I said, well, but I only can teach the first semester, because the second semester you're going to be very busy. We have elections in Spain, and I suppose that the Euro thing, the Euro mess, if you allow me, well, will be in full bloom. Well, honestly, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool optimist, and of course, my prime minister of the country I know best in the European Union jargon, just called snap elections after having said many, many times that he would go until the last day of his mandate. So my only regret is that I couldn't take full advantage of the community life at Yale, because I had to commute every week between elections in Spain and the issues in the European Union. Well, my second comment is about the title. I thought, well, I would call it the Euro crisis, the European Union mess, and then I thought, no, I'm going to just try to convey in this title what I want to just highlight in this afternoon and to discuss with you. What is this crisis about, really? In economy and beyond economy, because it is an economic crisis, but behind this economic crisis there are, and this is the subtitle, is it just about we Spaniards, the Portuguese, the Greeks, becoming Germans? Or is it just more than that? So let us just a few brushstrokes about where we are in facts. Of course, if we take the last events and we don't go to enumerate the 40+ summits, all of them crucial summits, the summit where everything would happen, either I mean, live or die. Just the last things. Well, I think that we have to mention Standard & Poor downgrading nine Eurozone countries, among them downgrading France. And this has a symbolic importance, because this breaks this, honestly, in great part fictitious, parity between France and Germany in the issues of Europe. No, France and Germany are not the couple. They are not equals. There is, and I will try I will come back to it, there is a reluctant hegemony by Germany. Germany, who smells like an hegemon, but tries to act as an accountant, so with a very low profile. I think that the second interesting thing that has happened have been the elections in Finland. And I will come back to this, where this is a good news, because the nationalist party in Finland just lost half of its voters. This is good news, last Sunday. And then I would say a mixed bag of news is the referendum in Croatia, because yes, out of 3 voters, 3 citizens that went to vote, 2 voted for, but the problem is that it was the lowest turnout of just voters in all the referenda of just incorporation to the European Union, only 44%, which also has a meaning. So what's this, the state of play? All these points that the common explanation of what we read in the newspapers in economic terms is not all of it. And then I would say that economy is part of it, but it's not the whole story. That there is, I think that there is a lack of emphasis on the underlying causes of the crisis and the more fundamental, deep-seated problems in the European Union. So, what's today's discourse in the Union? Under an appearance of a very technical discourse about deficits and debt, there is the first for us it was clear the reappearance. So as soon as Greek started to have problems, we had this acronym of the pigs that was coined in the run-up to the monetary union being really launched, so in 95, 96. But it had been subdued or forgotten, just it came back to the fore. Then there was, I think that nobody can, there was this kind of geographical determinism, the vocabulary, the core and the periphery, the pigs. There is an ideological message there that we have to address beyond economics, beyond the facts, beyond, of course, the needs. Now, until now, the explanation, the discourse has been, well, there is kind of sinners, because, I mean, I'm not inventing. This vocabulary has been in the European media. The sinners in the South, they were spendthrift. They have to just to take difficult measures and adjust. And this has been the common discourse. And the truth of the matter is that all the countries, even Greece, with the peculiarities of Greece that everybody knew. So everybody knew that since Greece joined the European Union, Greece has been the makeup and budget and Greece's budget have been two expressions that have gone together since Greece joined the European Union. But even Greece has just got into this taking very difficult measures. In the case of Spain, the first thing that the new prime minister did when he took power or he took office was to put our income tax at the level of Sweden. So my income tax today in Spain, the marginal income tax is 56%. This is the first measure. But we have to say that Spain is not at heart a center-right country. I was telling Professor Cameron a moment ago that 3 months before the Partido Popular got the first absolute majority, the Pew Research just, not discovered, but made it plain that the Spaniards saw themselves between 0 extreme left and 10 extreme right. They saw themselves at 4.3, yet they voted massively to the Partido Popular. And today it's a bit what has happened. The Partido Popular has received a fantastic mandate, a absolute majority, which with the system, proportional system that we have, is very difficult, plus plus government in the majority of the regions, and we have elections coming now in Andalusia, which is an important region, and all the polls and surveys say that they will. So there is an awareness by the populations that there must be an effort, and the same can be said in Italy, although I must say that Italy and Greece are a bit exceptional in democratic terms, because both governments just are not the result of elections, as the government in Spain that has a legitimacy that, unfortunately, I would say, Mr. Monti doesn't have and Mr. Papademos doesn't have. And it is a bit also something that I think that has to be taken into account when analyzing what's going on in Europe. When Monti, who is a full-fledged politician, I have served with him, and he's a full-fledged politician, he introduces himself and his government in saying, there is no politicians here, just technocrats. There is something going on there, and I will come back to this as well. But beyond this issue, I think that we have to say, that, or beyond, or with all these elements, we can say that in economic terms, we cannot say that it's just about austerity. I would say, in summarizing, that there are three major areas. The first is, of course, austerity. And yes, I mean, I'm not going to say that the south or the periphery were culprits, because everybody was in the same, I mean, the northern governments, northern banks, everybody was in the same, I would say, in the same game of just getting credits far beyond the resources, the real resources of these countries. But it is true that austerity is a must. But besides austerity, we need that the markets just stabilize. We cannot just go on with this run against the euro. And of course, in order to have stabilization of the markets, we need once and for all to send a very clear message that the European Union, and when I say the European Union, of course, I mean first and foremost Germany, that we are serious about what we say, that the 500 now extension of the stability mechanism will be available, and if needed, will be increased, and that we need to send a message that the ECB is the backstop, because unless we send this message, this market stability will not happen, and we will, this hemorrhage will go on. The third thing, however, is growth. I mean, if there is no growth, there is no way that the periphery will be able to pay back all these credits. No way. And this is something that until now, because the hegemonic culture is the German culture, there was this idea, no, austerity, and just austerity. Honestly, it's hopefully what I have heard and discussed in the run-up to the next summit, another big summit, but I hope that this one will at least change the message. It's that there will be a clear message in terms of growth. Some of you have for sure read Monti's interviews in the Financial Times, and there is, beyond the reality of the need in purely economic terms, there is also an important problem with the populations, with the Italian electorate, with the Greek electorate, with the Spanish electorate, that unless there is, that all the citizens in all these countries, and Portugal and Ireland and all the culprits, between inverted commas, they know that they have to go through these very difficult austerity measures. But of course, what they want is to know that this sacrifice will be meaningful, not that this will be it. So I think that in economic terms, unfortunately, I think that the next summit will mark a difference. We have to go beyond this idea of austerity and this kind of moral judgment that of the core. I mean, all the vocabulary, if you analyze it, it's extremely meaningful in these terms of core against periphery, of moral grounds all the time. But beyond economics, and in the questions we will go back to economics. Beyond economics, I think that the European Union has to face three major challenges. The first challenge, I have called it the European Union and the Cold War tempo. The second challenge, I would call it the Hamletians Europeans. And the third challenge, I think that Europe must come to terms to its place in the world, in the, not the new world, but the world of today. It's not new, but the world of today. If we go back for a second to Standard & Poor's report when they downgraded the 9 European countries, they highlight once and again one particular negative risk factors, and I quote, European policy making and policy institutions as a high risk factor. If you allow me the extensive quote, I quote, these reflect our view that the effectiveness, stability, and predictability of European policy making in general, and political institutions in general have not been as strong as we believe are called for by severity and broadening and deepening of the financial crisis, etc. So I think that the first thing that this sentence highlights is that the crisis of the European Union, beyond economic factors, is a crisis of trust. And why this crisis of trust? I think that if you take a look at the figures of the European Union are not, I mean, they are bad, but not worse than the US or not worse than the UK, and the UK is closer to us. However, what the markets have seen in the European Union is that the three no's that were included in the monetary union were enshrined in the Maastricht Treaty. No bailout, no exits, and no defaults. These three no's are these three maybe, and this is a matter of trust, of confidence. In the end, this quote by Standard & Poor's is that there is a weak structure there. There is a weak structure, but a weak institutional structure. Now, it's very much a la mode to say, oh, but the monetary union was ill-conceived. This is what we read every day. It's true that in '95 you would see some comments, but not as we see them now. There are, I mean, I have read articles just, I mean, questioning the common sense of having set this set of rules. But the truth of the matter is that the rules, the Maastricht criteria, were not respected in the first place. And if we agree that there is a lack of trust in the system as it is, then I think that we start to have an understanding. And why do I say this Cold War tempo? Because the truth of the matter is that the European construction has always worked like this. You put a bridgehead, so the Maastricht criteria, the criteria on the deficit, on inflation, on debt, and then you build around. And then in the treaty, you put what I call the Trojan horse of the European construction, that in articles that are then have been interpreted by the institutions and by the court. from this bridgehead, you build up, you consolidate the institution. And this has been true in all major breakthroughs in the Union. What has happened is that the monetary union was born with the Delors Committee in '88, in the old Cold War times. And what was the characteristic of these old Cold War times? Stability, stability. The European Union had the time to discuss, to elaborate, to digest, to do committees and after committees, and this has always been exactly the same. And then to enshrine in the treaty, vote the treaty, which means that the monetary union was conceived in '88, but in truth, it was enforced, of course, 14 years later, but 14 years later is not important, is that it was conceived in the Cold War world, and it was implemented with this conception in a world that has nothing to do. And it has nothing to do because what has changed is that this is the metronome, the tempo, the time. This way of just acting in the European Union, we have to address it. We cannot just go on with it. If we, just a contrario, had the Fed in 2008 or 2009 just got the European path, the United States would have been in a very, very dear situation. And of course, I'm not an expert constitutionalist of the US Constitution, the American Constitution, but honestly, I think that more than one, if this had been in Europe, would have questioned the capacity of the Fed to address certain measures. But the issue is that there was the political will was there, and the awareness that it had to be done, and it had to be done fast because this was the tempo. So this would be my first, I would say, remark of what is beyond the crisis. The second I have said is these Hamletian Europeans. If you take a look and you compare with any other society in the world, including United States, you see that we are plagued by all kinds of isms. We are the kings of isms. Of course, thanks goodness, it's not communism, and it's not, which were our inventions as well, and Nazism and fascism and all colonialism, all these bad isms. But we have these Hamletian isms, which is relativism, existentialism. We are between Hamlet and Sartre. Skepticism against the backdrop of entitlement. And one of the things that we will have to address is this, in two fronts. First, there is a certain contradiction that Europeans that are extremely skeptic of the politicians, the structure of politics, we take for granted that the state will go from cradle to cemetery with us and provide for everything. And of course, our system, which has worked and has worked wonderfully, was based once more in the stability, in this family structure where women did not work, where all this has been, did not work and had children, because of course now they work and they don't have children. Our birth rate, and this is another big difference with the United States. Of course, it is an important. So I think that this aspect of, on the one hand, knowing, because everybody knows, everybody acknowledges that we cannot just afford the welfare state that we have. And this is deeply rooted, knowing this, but not wanting to acknowledge, and just escaping in a kind of angst of, as I say, and this is paralyzing, because at the same time, we are self-doubting and many times self-deprecating, forgetting that, frankly, the European Union is the area in the world where you have the healthiest, best educated, longest living, freest individuals in the world. I mean, yes, we don't have children, but frankly, someone my age in any of these emerging markets, countries or whatever, I would be out of, not the market, out of everything. In Europe, we have this, and we should, of course, we should address the shortcomings that having the birth rates that we have are. But at the same time, I mean, come on, we are still a very prosperous, the most prosperous area in the world, and we have assets, but we have to address this. The third area is that we have to find our place in the world. And in this, I think that our relationship, our transatlantic relationship, plays an important role. You have to be European to understand the ambivalence, because there is a certain ambivalence in the way Europeans address United States. We have this, we acknowledge we have been living under the security, the umbrella of security that, by the way, was at the origin of this stability, of this stable, of this time that we had to just go through all our reflections in this fantastic project, which the European construction is. But we have to come to terms with the fact that the United States is not that it is out of love with Europe, which is how the Europeans resent it. I mean, President Obama was voted 99% by the Europeans. Remember when he was at the Brandenburg Gate? I mean, and there is a certain, I think that it's, if I said out of love, is because it has this kind of irrationality. Yes, for the United States, Europe is not any longer the problem as subject. Unfortunately, we are becoming the problem as object, because before we were the problem as subject, because really what mattered were what would happen in political terms in Europe in the fight against communism. Today we are a problem, an object. Yes, Obama is now calling everybody, Merkel and Cameron and Sarkozy, telling them, I mean, come on, just put your house in order. If not, your euro. This is the only thing. But we are not either. We are not perceived by the Americans as the allies that they need. That America needs, in the sense that the big challenges that America perceives itself as facing are much more in the Pacific, are not in Europe, are not in this area, and are different. And of course, we could go, and maybe during the question time, we can go in just the disappointment that Secretary Gates, in his farewell speech of NATO, said about the Europeans, about how the Europeans perform. This is part of it. The part of it is also that the United States has an Atlantic coast, but it also has a Pacific coast. And of course, Uncle Sam is looking east. And this is something that we have to acknowledge and not just resent, but use it as Europeans. Because in this area of finding our place, we need more self-confidence about what we are doing. And my last comment would be that all in all, this European project that now, for obvious reason, is pending on what will happen with the euro. There are some optimists that say, well, if the euro goes, the European construction will still go forward. Maybe because at a certain moment in my life, I was a matrimonialist, so a lawyer, and I have divorced many people. I know that when relations go sour, and once more relations within the Eurozone, When they go sour, you end up fighting for who gets the cat or who gets the 2 chairs in the bathroom. So I'm personally convinced that we need to get this right. That in order to get this right, we need, as I say, we need to acknowledge that we don't have to change the narrative. Our narrative of the European construction, we have to acknowledge that the tempo has changed, that we need to find ways that while preserving the rule of law, while preserving that the European construction is a construction in law and by law, we cannot take ages to take a decision. I can tell you, and this is an anecdote, I was one of the mothers of the ill-fated constitution, in the sense that I was a member of the presidium of the 12 people that drafted this ill-fated constitution. I can tell you that sometimes we would be discussing for hours at length things that honestly were just the sex of the angels. This we cannot acknowledge. We also have to address this aspect of self-doubt. Well, we are where we are. We are not the Europeans of the 18th or 19th, or in the case of Spain, 17th century. No, but we are the Europeans of the 21st century. And we have our assets, and we have to come to terms with the issues from the euro to the welfare state, but we can. And frankly, what we have to be extremely proud is that the European construction is, in my opinion, I am dyed in the wool optimist and dyed in the wool Europeanist. In fact, I went into politics because of Europe, not because of politics. That the European construction is the best human project of the 20th century, and I hope that it will be the best human project, at least in the first third of the 21st century, because I hope that in the end we will reach a kind of integration which will not be exactly federalism, but it is integration that we need. We need to go forward and to really overcome all this by discipline for everybody, especially for the unruly of the South, but also by acknowledging what we are, where we are, and that the future is a future as Europeans. We don't have a future even as Germans. We don't. I mean, or they don't. I'm not German, but they don't. Thank you.
That was a fascinating talk. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you a question about the last few things you said about the relations. I feel like in Europe, after centuries of bitter wars between our nations, especially culminating the atrocities of last century, finally, with the European Union, we tried to put that behind us. We were together, the French-German axis, they used to call it, pro-European. And now in Greece, people are talking about the Fourth Reich, and in Germany, they're saying, Greeks sell their island. So everybody hates each other again. How are we going to get through this?
Well, thank you for the question, because this is the summary of where we are. You are absolutely right. I think that, first of all, we have to acknowledge that, yes, the European construction, at the beginning, since the beginning, or maybe at the beginning, because then it faded down, it was essentially political. And yes, it was about not having another bloodshed in the European territory, because we have had bloodsheds after bloodshed almost every generation. Yes, it was there. But what we have to acknowledge is that the narrative changed very fast, and this original purpose was forgotten. And then what took over was prosperity, 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 and then for the newcomers, democracy. It was true for Spain, for Greece, for Greece first, for Portugal and Spain, and of course for the Eastern European countries. But let's be clear, the legitimacy of the European Union in the eyes of the Europeans was about Europe means prosperity. This is so. I think that this, honestly, in hindsight, was a mistake that is also linked to another aspect which is very characteristic of Europeans. And I must say that when I was Foreign Affairs Minister, many times I reflected on this, is that it's not just that the European construction is a construction about forgetting the feuds. It's about forgetting history. I mean, many times when you are confronted with other populations, Europeans are very surprised because for these populations, take the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, I mean, the Arabs, history is a presence. In Europe, we have tried to forget our memory. Our memory was so difficult that we have tried to forget it. And I think that this is also a mistake. You cannot forget history. You have to acknowledge it, and you have to overcome it. Because by forgetting history and by betting on prosperity, what we don't have is any bonds. So there is a very good article by Fukuyama in the American Interest, the website, where he says exactly this. Then a German of the Western lander, well, had no doubt that they had to bail out or whatever necessary to the Eastern land. The same way that in United States, New Jersey knows that if South Carolina just has a catastrophic event, there is no question that there will be a support. This does not exist because we have only bet on this consumerist, very superficial idea that Europe meant prosperity. And of course, right now it's not true. Right now, I mean, it's not true. It's not that obvious or that evident. It is true, and the figures, another interesting study that I have read lately, last week, a German study of the benefits of the euro. It's calculated, of course, the figures vary, but what is very striking is that everybody agrees that the euro has been beneficial for all the European countries, in the sense that, first of all, the transaction costs just lower, then you had economies of scale because you had this market, and all this meant from 2.5 GDP to 4 GDP, you have different takes, but everybody agrees. And what all the pundits agree is that among the most benefited by the euro are the Germans, which is not something that they have interiorized, because we need not to change the narrative, but to go to this original narrative now, not in saying, well, the reason why we do this is not to have bloodsheds in our territory, although, you know, the 150 kilometers from the very cultivated Vienna, we have been killing each other, Europeans, I mean, 15, 20 years ago, or even less. So what I think that the narrative has to be, and people have to understand that for the future, so learning from our history, for the future, our future, we don't have critical mass in the world of today unless we really have a bigger integration and we overcome these problems. Yes?
You know, having spent time during the holidays with our friends and family in Germany, I mean, and most of them are diehard Europeans, a couple of impressions we brought back home here. One of is, especially people on the periphery saying, you know, this is the Fourth Reich, and the Germans are saying, you know, since the introduction of euro, the wages in Germany have kept pretty stable. Yeah. Actually, they went down. Yeah. So austerity, we have taken that very seriously. Now we are being told we are the new masters, and I really believe, even with the very liberal people in Germany, there is going to be at some point a serious backlash if the rest of the continent keeps on telling them you are the new Nazis or the Fourth Reich and stuff like that. I think we have to really balance that kind of language. It's not I mean, we could see it with our son, who is a 29-year-old physician who works day and night, and he was like saying, you know, at some point, I really don't want to even listen to this, all of this, that we have to become more Mediterranean, and so.
But you are absolutely right. No, but you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right, although, let me tell you that this is the CDU, and it was in all newspapers, Google. The CDU, the first intervention in the CDU Congress was, well, now Europe is going to speak German. So, unfortunately, these silly things are said all over. Now, second, Germans are absolutely right. They took the right decisions, and they gain in competitiveness, acknowledging that the salaries were too high, which we Spanish we haven't, and Portuguese neither, and Greeks neither. I mean, I can tell you that we were not in government. When we were in government, we had a balance. The first thing is that my party, when we were in government, we bet. So we have been advocating. Germans are absolutely right, and we need this austerity. I'm definite that we need. And frankly, I will quote Sikorski, the Polish Foreign Affairs Minister, that said, and I'm absolutely on his line, Polish. I said, I probably will shock, and he said that in Berlin, I probably will shock many, because for sure I'm the first Polish Foreign Affairs Minister that is going to say this. I fear much more German inaction than German leadership. We need German leadership. And frankly, let's acknowledge this. I think that Germans are very uncomfortable. They are the reluctant, as I say, reluctant. Why? Because honestly, they fear this. Because we have tried to get rid of history, but you cannot. It's silly. History is there. And what we have, this was my response to you, what we miss is the opportunity to explain history, to come to terms with history, and we haven't. And I think that there is a very unfair, absolutely unfair approach, both in Germany, because I can tell you that I have attended conferences where when I have said sinners and spendthrift, and it's not the terms. What must be said is that Germans saw that in this new world, in order to be competitive, they had to take difficult measures, and they did. And they did, among other things, because they were in grand coalition, because this is the effect. And frankly, this is very difficult. And you know, it's not that Germans need to be more Mediterranean, but you know what? Maybe German now should let Germany consume a bit more, because unless we Spaniards and the Portuguese can export, you know, we will never make it. So this is what is said, is not become, we need Germans the way they are, the best Germans. Now, my last comment is that I have been in these scaffoldings of the European Union, where I have done many things in Brussels. I say I went into politics not really realizing that I was going into politics, because in those days, you know, Europe, I was told by my colleagues, hey, you are crazy, you are going to a parliament in the moon, to Brussels. I mean, things are happening here. And I must say that there is something that is changing in Germany pervasively. And this is not me. Is Ulrike Gero, you know her well, Ulrike Gero, and she's absolutely right. And we cannot blame the Germans. The Germans, since the beginning of the European construction, have systematically, and I have been negotiating with them, Germany would always look for its interest within the European interest, never outside the European interest. So first was, well, what can be done in Europe? And then they would say, well, within what can be done in Europe, how can we manage our interests? Now Germany has been normalized. After reunification, Germans say, well, you know what? Over. Once more, because there is not a polity, there is not a feeling that Germans have to have a solidarity towards Greeks. And of course, now Germany has become a normal country, and between inverted commas. So the German approach is like the French approach or the Spanish approach. Well, what's my interest? And you know, this idea that you go to Brussels to take the most out of it. This has never been the German approach. And you know what? I mean, I'm sorry, this is leadership. This is leadership. And unless Germany goes back and revamps, it's not because the European construction has gone through phases, but we need German leadership. We do need, and frankly, it's not because Germany hides, and when you see the couple Merkozy, you see it. Chancellor Merkel hides behind because she doesn't feel comfortable in being just being perceived as being the leadership, while President Sarkozy revels in just being the one that does and just thumping. And so, but this is why I said that France being demoted of the AAA had a symbolic import, because now there is no equivalence. And now, so my response to you is that I really feel disgusted when I listen to this kind of Fourth Reich or whatever. But at the same time, I think that Germany has to take openly, comfortably, the role that you know, because of macroeconomics, because of, you know, because of also because of perception. Remember when the Greek crisis started, I wrote an article that you wouldn't see a European face, not the Van Rompuy, not the President of the Commission, just we knew all the pantsuits of Chancellor Merkel, because she was all the time in the news. It was crisis in Greece and Angela Merkel. This was the beginning, and it was very clear because instinctively or reasonably, the markets knew where, and the media knew where things had to come. And I mean, what I'm calling for is not for a Fourth Reich, absolutely not. And I think that no German would accept these crazy sentences like, now Europe is going to speak German, which is unfortunate. But we really need a much more self-confident Germany of the role that everybody acknowledges that Germany has. So when everybody says, you know what, you are the leader, and we accept that we need to have these austerity measures, and we know that we need to gain in competitiveness, and we know, but you know what, being a leader is also just sending this message of trust that will make that the run against the euro will stop. Because at the beginning it was easy, because it was just one hand on another hand, but now there are that many, so your turn.
Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, you were talking about solidarity. What do you think? What are the values and the virtues in Europe and for Europe to believe in as a European Union? And are those values and virtues universal? Are they just European because of history? Where are the boundaries of that European ideal?
Well, that's another very important question, because I think that this is what makes Europe an indispensable ally for the United States. It's about values. I think these values are universal, absolutely. I think that a value cannot be just a value for me. I mean, when I discuss with Muslim Arab or Arab Muslim friends, and they tell me, well, equal rights for men and women according to the Quran. And I say, you know what? This is a non-starter. This is a non-starter. These values, and I take one, equality between men and women, this is universal. This cannot be declined, and it's not European, it's not Western, it's universal. But I think that, I mean, yesterday I had someone telling me, yeah, but you were in government and you know what, you supported Mubarak and you went and you saw. Fortunately, Gaddafi never came to Madrid. We didn't have the big tent as he had everywhere, all over, from Brussels to Paris. But so you cannot say that you support these values. Yes, we do. Yes, what has been called the West, which is a very, because it's the West and it's a majority of Arab Muslims in Tunisia, even Ghanouchi, in discussing with him about the right of minorities. All these issues are not European, but in our societies, they are pervasive. And yes, we have been in contradiction with them. Yes, at least in partial contradiction, because the values have always been there, and these values are long-term interests, because it is in our interest, not just as countries, as massively United States, Europe, what is called the West, but also in these societies, and this is what we have seen, this want for a decent, equal, fair life. I think that if you go to the origins of the Tunisian, it's about unfair inequality. So in the end, these are the values of democracy, protection. I think that they are in three big areas. Just peaceful means, pluralism, and the protection of minorities. And this when you are in government, and I remember just negotiating with Algeria, which is not the most, I would say, democratic country, but you know what? You are in government, you need the Algerian gas, and the one that has the key to this Algerian gas, you have to have an interaction with this government. Does this mean that you forget your values? No, but of course you cannot bring the values in the first place. You have to reach sometimes very uncomfortable just balances between interest and values. But you know what? We do, and we have societies that will criticize us. Will criticize, I have been criticized for so many things, decisions that I took while in office, our societies. There are other societies, autocratic societies, non-democratic societies, where they have not the least of the concerns about anything, but the sheer, clear, pure interest. All in all, our societies are rule of law based. And yes, not always do we comply the way we should with the rule of law. But you know what? It's always there. And we have checks and balances. And we are accountable. And this, I think, it's not European, but Europeans are, it's in our DNA. And this is what I think that makes us the indispensable ally with our friends the other side of the Atlantic. Because yes, well, we don't share capital punishment and we are very different, because we are kind of daddy knows best, these offsprings of ours, naive and this and that. But in the end, we are along the same track. And my guess is that in the 21st century, values are going to be extremely important. And the way we are seeing societies just raising against inequalities, and the first value is this idea of equality, of just a decent treatment, of just counting for your own destiny, being able to contribute to all these are, as I say honestly, we are not perfect, but it is in our DNA. Yes,
Why don't we first there, and then over to the left, and you.
I wanted to ask two questions. First, Well, we started by talking about mechanisms like the European Central Bank giving the assistance that the poor countries and the heavily indebted countries need. There seems to be some sort of a chicken and egg problem here, because if what you need to have a lender of last resort is a great degree of trust, that's evidently sides don't have towards one another. And on the other hand, as long as you don't have the mechanisms, the trust will never come into being. How do you overcome that? So that's the first question. Second question was just keying off what you just said about universalism, the West, and other societies. Just to take a concrete example, say discussions about Turkey joining the EU. Can you just share from your perspective, what do you think Turkey should have joined? How should this have, should have gone?
Well, on the first issue, this issue, the chicken and egg and the mechanisms. Well, in the end, what you need is political will. I insist, this is a matter of trust. I think there is the experience in the United States saying, well, you know what, the Fed will be the backstop, will be the buyer of last resort, and this just bringing back confidence and trust to the markets, and not really costing, not having to invest. I think that the problem in Europe, with the euro, has been this hemorrhage, because we have always been too little and especially too late, or too little because too late, because the same measures taken 3-6 months before would have been enough. So this is my response. I think that we need a clear message that, you know what, we are there and we mean that no exit or exit, openly say, well, we are going to have a partial default in Europe. We are masters in muddling through there will be a default by Greece, and Greece will be out for 10 years, but then Greece will be back. So everybody, something like that. We have to just to say realistic and things that are credible. Now, on Turkey. Well, the truth of the matter, and I'm going to take one anecdote. You know that the French Senate voted yesterday or the day before yesterday, voted that it will be a criminalizing the denial of the Armenian of the Armenian genocide. Well, I'm not going to get into the Armenian genocide. If there is a question, I will. But what I think is that this clearly indicates that France is just taking a position against the entrance of Turkey in the European Union. And frankly, the problem is that in Europe today, because of the rise of the right-wing parties, because of the fear of immigration, because of immigration is another problem that, of course, when you see the problems of immigration in the United States, I think, well, they have no problem at all. I mean, problems, we have problems. The problems of immigration in the United States are administrative problems. We really have huge identity problems with immigration. All this means that there is an amalgam that public opinion is more and more against the accession of Turkey. I personally think it's a big mistake. I think it is in the interest of the Union to have Turkey, because what we are doing by negotiating in bad faith, because we haven't stopped officially the negotiations, by negotiating in bad faith, what we are doing is that we are promoting a much less rule of law, less secular society in the sense of the Kemalist Turkey, and a much more, I don't say, because it wouldn't be true, people say, well, the AKP government and the society in Turkey in general is just going to a more extremist Muslim approach. I think that what we are seeing in Turkey is a Putinization of the regime, not that much a Muslimization, but a Putinization, which I frankly I don't think it's a good thing for Europe. It is, I think it is our historical responsibility to just have, foster this experience, I mean, but this, I mean, this Turkish construction of a Muslim society with open society, open values, respect for minorities, and democracy, which was on the making. Yes, absolutely, it's true. But of course, the leverage of the European Union is less and less. Is less and less because at the same time, Turkey is more and more, I mean, is just being one of the success stories in economy and in terms of reference. Today, the most admired leader in the Arab world is Erdogan, which, I mean, come on, it's a bit, for us Europeans, I say it in admiration because let's not forget the Ottoman Empire was the colonial empire in many of these areas, where nevertheless the most respected leader is Erdogan. So Turkey is raising, Turkey is more and more fundamental for a fundamental area, and it would be in our interest not to have Turkey as a member tomorrow, because when I would discuss with my Turkish friends, I would tell them, I mean, come on, Spain, it took us 10 years of negotiation. 10 years of negotiation. And Spain was 70% of the GDP per capita of the rich communities, 70%. We were, in those days, 32 million people. And frankly, we were not Muslims. And we had a legal order that did not change. When Franco died and we got the constitution, we got political rights, we got a lot of things, I'm not diminishing that, but our structure, the civil law, commercial law, administrative law, all this did not change. Even labor law is the Franco law, unfortunately, because it's crazily protective in this old idea of nationalistic autocratic regimes that were in Europe. So I tell them, I mean, Turkey is not ready to get soon in the European Union, but you need to have a clear commitment with Turkey that the day Turkey fulfills the Copenhagen criteria, Turkey is in. It is our interest, among other things, because a secular, minority respecting, equal rights respecting Turkey would be extremely important for our Muslim communities that are beginning to say, well, you know what, my daughter doesn't go to school after 12 because she's sent wherever, to Morocco or wherever to get married, and this is just an example. So we need, it is in our interest, but unfortunately, as I say, it might be in our interest, but it's less and less popular. Yes. Well, yes?
Yeah, right here and then back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I very much agree with what you say that Europe setting standards in terms of healthcare, education, and welfare in general. And I think like all the reforms we're going through, or we are going to go through, should be focused on keeping those as much as possible. But one thing I think was not addressed is that I think one of the things we've learned with this crisis, at least like the layman has learned, is the power of the financial markets nowadays. And I think it's not fair that these austerity measurements are focused only in cuts for the welfare system, but not in cuts for the power of these financial institutions, which have been the ones that have made most profit from the bubble that has led us to this crisis.
Well, I think you're right. It's in a very Marxist evocation, which is not original. There is a new ghost that just is all over Europe, and this is the markets. However, I mean, you're right. I fully agree with you that we have to keep the essential, the important of the welfare state. We need to keep this solidarity with the underprivileged. And this is something that, I mean, it is not a criticism towards the United States, but for a European sensitivity, all the debate about the Obamacare is a bit, I mean, we don't understand, because for us, this is the essential. So I fully agree with you that this has to be kept. Now, I think that, let's be realistic. The markets are just trust. It's just about trust. And let's also be realistic. You know, as I said, the first measures of the conservative government in Spain were not, they haven't yet cut anything, but they have increased the marginal tax to 56%. So this, you're right that we need to address, I think that inequality is at world, I mean, all over the world. I was reading the other day that the 1% in the United States has the 90% of the wealth in this country. Inequalities in China, all over, in the emerging, and also in Europe. We are crushing the middle classes all over the world, and I think that inequality is the big challenge that we have to address. On just punishing the financial institution, I don't think it's a matter of punishing. It's a matter of creating a legal framework where because what they have done is take advantage of the fact that there is a globalized economy, but we don't have a legal framework that just is ruling this economy. And you know that one of the measures that we'll be discussing the next European summit is this financial transactions Tobin tax. No, Tobin no, because now we don't call it Tobin, but European tax. It's discussed. So there is an awareness in Europe that you have to address these issues, and I think we have. But my opinion, my personal opinion, is that it's the wrong approach. The approach should be to reach legally binding agreements, what the G20 is not doing. The G20 is doing things, but there is not the willingness to say, well, let's just have a regulation. Even the Basel III, all this, even this is not enough. We need to address this from the rule of law perspective, and not as regulations, but as legal framework, more in the continental sense of principles, of just not ruling, because if you rule the details, if you have a common law approach of the details, there will always be holes where they will just escape. We need to establish a legal framework, and unless there is an agreement, and I hope there will be, because there is a world public opinion awareness about inequality. What I think is that this has not yet been linked with the need to have legal agreements, framework agreements, where these financial institutions could not just delocalize to Hong Kong or to wherever, Shanghai or wherever, just to avoid, and at the same time just still be acting in our markets. Yes.
With the recent financial crisis, a lot of people have said that Europe can go one of two ways. It can either break apart or it can become the United States of Europe. You look across a lot of policy areas, whether it was what was happening in Libya and the disparate responses from each capital. Do you think nations, as they are now, remain relevant if the EU is going to continue, or will that relevancy have to transfer over to the institutions of the European Union?
Well, the truth of the matter is that although the Lisbon Treaty was a step forward, because the Lisbon Treaty was exactly the constitution without the name. This small tinkering on the sides of the treaties, as it was presented, in my opinion, it was not very honest, but it was a step forward. And yes, you're right that there is a decoupling between the treaty and the public opinion. The public opinion do not want to transfer any more sovereignty. And this is true in Germany, but it is true all over. But once more, my approach is that it's because we have not explained well the reality to the citizens. We need to do a lot of pedagogy. And you have mentioned the Libya case, and I fully agree with you that contrary to what is many times said, oh, Europe, no, on the contrary, it was a big blunder for Europe. It was a big problem because, among other things, Germany was against the resolution. And I think that this was a very bad signal. We may now try to say Europeans and Europe. No, it was not Europeans and Europe, and in my opinion, it was very bad for the European construction. So, as I said at the beginning, I'm an optimist. I always say if I were not an optimist, I wouldn't be alive. So, this is the starting point. I'm an optimist, and I think that we can and we must, and I can tell you that we are many in Europe, and that we think that there must be an effort. And what we know from our history is that Europe reacts when we are at the border of the precipice, and then we react, and then we are able. So I think that as we are dancing to the precipice, we are approaching this moment. I hope that we will react, that there will be, because whenever I explain, and I go many times, not just in Spain, to audiences that are not the glitterati, the Eurocrats, no, plain people. And from the beginning to the end, I see that there is already a certain change, because what they tell me is, you know what, we didn't know that. When I present the figures and the facts and the explanation, I'm convinced that if we would explain it in this very simple idea, you know what, the future is a future of more integration, without just forgetting that we are Germans and Spaniards and Greeks, and we have our peculiarities, and as all families, we will have our difficulties among us, but understanding that our future is a future of integration. And it's an uphill road, especially, I would say, with the glitterati, by the way, with the Eurocrats and all this that have lost this. They are the most Hamletian and existentialist and all that, as I said at them. Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.